Wednesday on Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Happy to have you guys back for another day. Maybe you guys can help me contain this fire hose of news. Man, when it comes out fast like this, it is hard to contain. But we've got a lot to get to today. Got to talk about the Timberwolves winning over Oklahoma City on Tuesday. One of a battle between two of the best teams record-wise in the West this year. The Wild got a win in their first game under new head coach John Hynes. I got some thoughts on that. We'll get to some Vikings stuff here a little bit later. Our usual film review, our poetry, but also talking about what's now a quarterback controversy. It's got to be, right? Who's going to start? I don't know if it's, controversy suggests that there's going to be some sort of, people up in arms about it. But, there could be controversy, at least in the sense that we don't know right now who is going to start the next game at quarterback for the Vikings. And it very well might not be Josh Dobbs. I'm just kind of parsing what Kevin O'Connell said on Monday, and I'll get to that more in a little bit, but I'm kind of parsing that. I'm thinking they might make a switch. I'm still not sure. My instinct says they should still stick with Dobbs, but we'll see. But controversy nonetheless, in that we don't know who is going to play for the Vikings when they resume play in a couple weeks in Las Vegas. First, though, what did I miss? I got to start with the Gophers because, man, what a bunch of news coming out of Gopher football in these last couple days. Starting quarterback Athan Kaliakmanis announces on Tuesday on X, formerly Twitter, that he is entering the transfer portal. Now, Kaliakmanis was a sophomore, a third-year sophomore this year for the Gophers. Started every game, like I said, all 12 games. Struggled with his consistency, certainly. Only completed 53.1% of his passes. Different games, he looked, like one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten at times. Other times, he looked like one of the worst quarterbacks in the Big Ten at times. That consistency will drive coaches crazy, and I'll get to that a little bit more with Vikings thoughts here in a little while as well. But he enters the portal. Another quarterback for the Gophers follows him into the portal the same day on yesterday. Drew Viotto, true freshman from Michigan, 3-star recruit out of Michigan, also in the transfer portal. Cole Kramer, their veteran quarterback, guy with 1 year of eligibility left, he might go to the portal at some point, too. He's kind of showing some signs that this might have been his last year with the Gophers, although you wonder if maybe he will at least stick around to quarterback them in the bowl game, because otherwise the only quarterback left on the roster, I believe, would be freshman walk-on Max Shikenjansky. So that's where we are with the quarterbacks now, but this all came after, of course, Monday, when New Hampshire quarterback Max Brosmer, junior from New Hampshire, who was the top passer in FCS this past season. He also ran a little bit this year as well, had 5 rushing touchdowns, carried the ball 57 times, but he threw for almost 3,500 yards this year. He announced on social media that he has also received a scholarship offer from the Gophers. So it feels like that was the thing that kick-started this. Now, what does this all mean? Well, I would think that Brosmer is likely to wind up here. You kind of read the writing on the wall. You read that he's announcing that he got an offer. Right after that, you see all these other players, saying, "Hey, I'm out of here." Randy Johnson reporting in his Star Tribune story today, according to a source with knowledge of the situation, reading straight from his story, Coach PJ Fleck met with the Gophers quarterbacks and would not fully guarantee who the starter would be in the 2024 season. Fleck told the group he would look into the transfer portal for competition heading into next year. Now, when you go into the portal, it doesn't mean you are for sure gone. It means you are likely gone, though, right? You can come out of the portal and stay with your team, but usually when you go into the transfer portal, as we've seen, since this became a thing in the last few years, usually a player is going to go somewhere else. So this is really interesting because we came into the season thinking Kaliakmanis was this long-term answer for the Gophers, for Fleck, replacing Tanner Morgan, who has been here the bulk of PJ Fleck's coaching career. I went back and looked at it. I was curious. The quarterback record when the Gophers do not have Tanner Morgan is not great. Tanner Morgan made 47 career starts here in Minnesota, the vast majority of PJ Fleck's tenure here. Gophers were 33-14 in the 47 games that Tanner Morgan started. under PJ Fleck. They are 16-20 in all other games started by any other quarterback aside from Tanner Morgan. And I kind of jokingly will say this. I don't mean to speak ill of PJ Fleck and his quarterbacks, especially on PJ Fleck's birthday. Turns 43 today, I noticed in the course of researching this segment, but it's not been great. We've had a lot of different guys come and go, guys that they thought were going to be program changers or at least guys that could hold down that role for a while. Looking back at kind of the history of this, Connor Rhoda, Demry Croft, Zach Annexted. You remember these names? Seth Green was supposed to be the savior at one point. He ended up being a productive player, but more of a wildcat quarterback, did not become that starter when he was such a highly recruited player out of high school. Vic Viramontes was reminded of that name. Royce and I were struggling to come up with that name. I think it was Moneybanks on Twitter that reminded me of what his name was. He was that junior college transfer. They brought him in, early in Fleck's tenure. They thought he might be the answer. He didn't even make it. I don't think he made it through like a full offseason before he was gone, or at least he never played the quarterback position. Then, of course, now Athan Kaliakmanis, Cole Kramer, guys like that. They've never really been able to get to that next level with the quarterback, aside from the really good play they got from Tanner Morgan in 2019 and the okay play they got from him in other years, especially the end of 2018, a good part of 2021. He was playing pretty well in 2022, and that surprised me too. I didn't realize. I went back and looked. Tanner Morgan by far had the better numbers in 2022 than Athan Kaliakmanis. We got excited about Kaliakmanis at the end of the year, especially when he beat Wisconsin, but Tanner Morgan was by far their better quarterback a year ago. So just a legacy of mediocrity when Tanner Morgan doesn't start. And they got to get this position right, though. I think he's on a quest to do that. We'll see if this New Hampshire quarterback is the solution. Seems, though, like there's a big change going on here with this program. He's evaluating everything. When you go 5-7, like he said, you have to take a hard look at everything. You got to imagine they're going to go harder at the portal. They're looking at all these other teams that have had success with quarterbacks, especially in the portal. That's going to be a different approach for them. It's not really how they've been built in the past, but maybe it's how they need to be built going forward. Speaking of changes, Wild win their first game under new head coach John Hynes, snapping that 7-game losing streak that led to Dean Evason's dismissal. So Monday, Evason's gone. Hynes comes right in. Tuesday, they play a game right away. There's all sorts of media availability. Loved Royce's column. He talked to Bruce Boudreau and just talking about how the nature of the business in the NHL. Go give that a read if you want to. But it was interesting after the game, just like looking at some of the comments, especially on Instagram. And I know social media is a bad place to go sometimes to get a full spectrum of what people are really thinking. But it seems like a lot of fans are still upset that Evason got let go, that they think he got a raw deal. And, I agree with them to a certain degree. This wasn't his fault. And I think even Bill Guerin would say this wasn't Dean Evason's fault. They just needed kind of a change for the sake of change, sometimes a message wearing thin. But you had a lot of fans on social media saying, hey, bring back Evason. They didn't win because of Hynes. So why are they suddenly playing well again? Someone called Hynes mid. That pejorative just cracks me up sometimes. But listening to Hynes after the game, it sounds like he's a no-nonsense coach, and that he, whatever he did, whether it was something he said, whether it was his presence, they certainly played their best game in a few weeks in beating St. Louis 3-1. Here was Hynes after the game just talking about some of the very basic things that led to that victory.
I thought our play without the puck was really strong in the checking game, but I also felt on the other side of that we were faster with the puck. I thought there was guys that were the speed off the puck was better, so the puck carrier was forced to move the puck quicker so we get to a faster game. And I think the combination of that, they were going, and they just kept doing it. So credit to those guys. Having the opportunity to go to battle with them today, I just, you can just see that there's lots of areas of the game where it's a really good group. I mean, whether it's, the hard areas of the game, face-offs, puck battles, net front battles, hard on pucks, like they're there. And then you see when there's a lot of skill and talent in the lineup. And I think if we can just continue to build off of that, being more connected, how can we play a faster game with moving our feet, but also moving the puck? I think we can try to get, continue to build on that to be faster than we were tonight.
Now listen, the NHL, of all the major leagues, now maybe baseball's up there too, but of all the major leagues, you need the least amount of run-up time, right? Like these guys get to training camp and a day or two later they're playing preseason games. You bring in a new coach, he gives a little pep talk, he'll probably change systems a little bit, not just trying to do the same things over and over again. But this is a sport where a different voice can change a dynamic pretty quickly. You're not learning an entirely new, playbook like the NFL or something like that, or the NBA where you've got a bunch of sets you're trying to run and trying to learn different chemistry. Yeah, there's going to be on-ice chemistry, but sometimes a voice is all that is needed to affect change. So willing to give this another look, see if this team can get something going. Definitely a positive move in the right direction with a 3-1 win in that first game. Wolves won't be going to the NBA in-season tournament quarterfinals, nudged out of that even with a good showing in their group, but more importantly beat Oklahoma City 106-103. Anthony Edwards takes a nasty fall on a dunk attempt. Sounds like he was in good spirits after the game. He didn't return after that beyond he shot his free throws and he was back on the bench for a bit, but he looked like he was in discomfort reading Chris Hynes' story in today's Star Tribune. But a big win for them. They're 13-4. And hopefully, and it looks like he maybe avoided serious injury. You could see him missing a game or two, perhaps, although he hates missing games. But they're 13-4. Oklahoma City is a good team. They were 11-5 coming in. This is a team that keeps stacking up good wins, beating teams when they're at full strength, beating teams when they're missing some guys, playing good team basketball and rallying without Ant in this game, rallying when they needed, other people to give them a spark. Troy Brown Jr. does it in this game, has a, bunch of points after Ant goes out, some key buckets in the fourth quarter, target center going big again. It's just, I don't know, we keep waiting for, is this team for real, and it's still only 17 games into the season, but you keep stacking up wins like this. You keep thinking, okay, something's going on over here. They're building something. Rudy Gobert's been fantastic this year. Different people elevating their game at different times. That is the mark of a very good team. So we'll see. I was trying not to get too far ahead of ourselves here with how we think about this team. But man, 13-4, especially after that 1-2 start. 12-2 since that 1-2 start, playing like one of the best teams in the NBA, and the record has followed.
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino, let your story begin.
Let's break down the film. Andrew Kramer with me. Vikings lose 12-10. Andrew, Monday Night Football. We're talking now on Tuesday. Maybe the only good thing about Tuesday is that Josh Dobbs can't throw an interception on Tuesday because there's not a game today.
Boy, that was bad. Huh? Yeah, four picks, and just about all of them except for the one to Jordan Addison were really his fault. And the last one was maybe the most egregious, where he just desperation tries to lob that and gets tipped by a Bears defensive lineman as if it was thrown to him. I think you saw the clock strike midnight, back to a pumpkin, the whole thing, because this is a guy who has not been with this team. Obviously, you're seeing the lack of familiarity. Kevin O'Connell talked about it's basic stuff like just throwing a ball in rhythm of our offense and understanding when you got to take, one hitch and one kind of shoulder thrust before throwing it to give the receiver the time to get out of the break. Addison, the one he tipped into the interception, O'Connell put part of that on Dobbs and said, we need to understand, did that ball need to come out that quickly? And he said Addison needs to turn quicker, get his head around on the break, and be ready for it. But that didn't need to come out that quickly. And if you watch the playback, the protection was there. Dobbs took a roughing the passer penalty earlier on the same drive, so you saw his clock speed up a little bit. I think the Bears did a great job of applying pressure. They threw a different kind of game plan at him to keep him in the pocket, and it worked.
Yeah, let's get into that game plan, because that is, if a team can shut down Dobbs, and, Denver probably started to do some of these things last game too, and really limiting him in the second half of that game last Sunday night when the Vikings lost. But if there's a blueprint now and other teams can copy it, that's where you start to get concerned. Like, okay, have they kind of figured out what, how to stop this kind of magical ride?
Yeah, and Dobbs started obviously 7 games for the Cardinals, but I don't know if he was making the kind of dynamic plays with his legs. I know he had 3 rushing touchdowns for them, but he wasn't making the kind of dynamic plays with his legs he made in the Falcons game for the Vikings and was making earlier in these games against the Saints as well. And Vikings coaches talked about how, hey, we didn't really know this guy was as mobile as we found out. And I think defenses are learning now too, because you're seeing Chicago play a 5 wide front, really line up man to man, which helps you get the mismatches in terms of creating one-on-ones in the pass rush. But what it also does, if you're disciplined, is it forces Josh Dobbs to stay in the pocket, and you're kind of creating the pocket for him and then trying to kind of suffocate him in it by collapsing him. And they did a good job of that. And Dobbs, you saw, sometimes couldn't find a lane to escape, especially in the second half. He had to step up and throw the ball, which is what Chicago wanted. And you're seeing that he doesn't have the strongest arm. He's not the most accurate, and Chicago could break on a lot of these passes. And it wasn't just the execution of the passes either. It was the decision making. It was the first pick was should have been a wide open corner route to Addison, but he ends up lofting this ball in a decision that shouldn't have been made, because as he drops back to throw, Jalen Johnson makes a great read and drops from his cover 2 zone. I mean, that's a tough play even for Kirk Cousins to read on the fly and make, and Dobbs did not do that either. So I just think overall, from execution, from decision-making, from the head coach, like the Bears, put the Vikings in a tough spot, and really nobody had answers.
Yeah. And that, that gets to O'Connell too. Like you said, like I got into him pretty good on Monday's show, but now with kind of a nuanced 24 hours to kind of think back on it, what could he have done differently to help Dobbs in this game? Because it didn't seem like there were a lot of answers for what the Bears were doing to him.
Yeah, O'Connell lamented being too aggressive, which I think could be a few things, but he did specifically mention the first play where they do a play action deep shot to Addison, which Addison claims he caught. I talked to Addison after the game, and he said, that was a catch. The ball never hit the ground. I said, well, why didn't you push him to challenge it? And he said, I did, but we lined up so quickly that I didn't have much of a chance. And so, but O'Connell, looking back on it without seeing the film, but at the podium, had said, maybe that's a spot where I shouldn't put Dobbs in a 2nd and 10 that leads to a 3rd and 10 that leads to a 3 and out. It's those kinds of second guessing where he's maybe thinking we should have done things to be more conservative early on that would have given us ability to sustain drives. They had 3 plays in the first quarter. The Bears did the exact opposite. They choked the life out of the ball. I think they had 10 minutes of possession in the first half. If not more than that, might have been 12.
First quarter,
or first quarter, sorry. And so Chicago just kept the Vikings on the sideline because of those few wasted opportunities in that first half from Minnesota. And then in the second half, there were stretches before one of Dobbs' interceptions in the third quarter. Madison had 3 straight runs, and the third run ends in a negative. That happens with this offense. O'Connell then went 4 straight passes into the interception. It's stuff like that where he, as a former quarterback, pass-heavy coach, understands the numbers of how much more efficient it generally is to throw, gets away from it, the run game, very quickly. And I thought that Chicago defense was susceptible to some big play runs. Madison was running particularly well in the second half, but all they did was lean on him in pass protection and kept asking Dobbs to do more. And that's the thing with O'Connell too, where I'm thinking it's not just the situational stuff, it's just the overall philosophy of why are you putting so much on this quarterback who's struggling that much?
And he said, right, that he maybe thought about making a switch. That was before he thought about switching to Mullins, is it? But before Dobbs actually led that touchdown drive that got him that temporary 10-9 lead. I mean, the fact that he thought about it in game and wasn't committed to Dobbs, and it doesn't have to be, they've got a bye week to think about all this, but wasn't committed to who their starting quarterback is going forward. That's an interesting piece, because there was Dobbs mania for like 2.5 games, and now there isn't.
Yeah, Kevin O'Connell said he's gonna ponder a decision here.
Does that mean Christian Ponder?
No pun intended. Sorry about that. That was actually an accident. He said he was gonna mull a decision here on what to do, because I do think Nick Mullins gives them a decent shot. I know fans want to see more of Jaron Hall as well. But if Kevin O'Connell wants to run this system and be that system coach where he's trying to find the quarterback to fit it, I think it's Nick Mullins right now, the guy who's had the most experience and all that. And no, it's not a good sign for Josh Dobbs, but we need to take into context the 4 games. He's had 8 turnovers in 4 games.
Yeah, that's a lot.
They barely won the Falcons game. Obviously he just got there. They barely won the Saints game and he had a couple turnovers. He's had moments where he's escaped and been a magician, as coaches have said. You can't rely on that week to week. And how much winning football has he actually played outside of being kind of an improv artist in backyard football? That's not, as our colleague Ben Gessling said on our podcast yesterday, that's not how Kevin O'Connell wants to run his offense. He wants things on schedule. Generally, coaches want things as they're going to expect them to play out. It's really hard to do with a quarterback who just got here. You're seeing the timing is not there with the receivers. The timing is not there in the passing game with the ball placement and everything. I'm not shocked to hear O'Connell say he was considering a switch in game. What kept Dobbs in the game was right after he was considering it came the touchdown drive to Hawkinson. So that's why they let him finish that game. But they got a bye week now to think about a bigger change here moving forward.
I still think I don't know what they're going to do. I guess I'll hesitate at this moment to say what they're going to do, but seems like that's just such an interesting question, because all of their options right now have their own deficiencies. I mean, Mullins is more or less a backup. He was a starter for a while, but he's been a backup. Hall is young. The only sample size we have of him is small. It was relatively encouraging before he took that hit. He kind of maybe blends Mullins and Dobbs a little bit, in that he's got some escapability, but he's a little bit more familiar with the system than Dobbs. It's an interesting question, because they've got 5 games left. They're presumably going to get Justin Jefferson back. Like, there are some things working in their favor. All 5 of their final games are winnable, but none of them are layups. So I'm going to be really curious to see what he does there.
I think the important thing too is just think about how they've been winning and losing games. It's turnovers. Yes. And I know Kirk was just as much of a part of that while he was healthy. And frankly, some of their veterans and key guys have been part of it as well. But I would have to just guess that at this point, this coaching staff is going to think that Nick Mullins gives them that potential ball security option, because Brian Flores' defense is playing lights out. They played lights out again on Monday night. They deserved to win that game. They just didn't get the final stop or the game-changing takeaway, although they did get a couple key takeaways.
They did, yeah.
In that game. But yeah, you lose the turnover battle 4-2. You're not giving anybody a shot, and a rookie quarterback in Jaron Hall. I liked what I saw from that first drive, but that would very much feel like a developmental choice of like, we're just going to see what we got and not necessarily try to win every game.
Yeah, let's talk about the defense really quick before we get out of here. Like you said, they made some big plays. They kept the Bears out of the end zone, even on a lot of those long, time-consuming drives. And the Bears miss a field goal on the opening drive. After that one stalls, they make another couple field goals. They don't score a touchdown. Like, Denver didn't have a touchdown until that final drive either. And that's unfortunate, because in both these games, the defense does have a chance to put a final stamp on things and win the game. Even if they had kept them in the game for 58 minutes in both those cases, we kind of get a little negative because they gave up that touchdown to the Broncos. They gave up the game-winning field goal to the Bears. But by and large, the defense is the only reason they were staying close in this game.
It was. And I thought Danielle Hunter had another great game. This is coming a couple weeks after Brian Flores said he thought the Falcons game was his best game of the season. He has just continued to get better and better. And you saw him wreck a lot of plays. It's just Justin Fields is so hard to catch. And I think on that last 30-some yard pass that set up the game-losing field goal, the Vikings sent just 4. It was actually one of the times that Brian Flores didn't send the house. in a key situation. If you remember the 4th and 10 earlier in the game, he sent a 0 blitz, just everybody. And Cole Kmet just barely got out for a little dump off for the conversion. But this time Flores sat back, tried to play some coverage. They couldn't get there with their 4-man rush because, as we all know, Danielle Hunter's about the only guy in that 4-man rush who is reliable every single week. So it was an interesting choice, kind of swung back against his tendency in terms of what defense they played in that spot, and their coverage didn't hold up. And it was a tough call too. The in-breaking route underneath a deep kind of shell coverage. Anthony Barr said, we'd like to see that covered better, but also, with a guy like that in terms of Fields, you want to disrupt him and get him off his spot, force him to run around, and then your coverage becomes a little bit easier. So I think the Vikings played throughout that game very, very, very well, and deserved to win even regardless of that final play. And we should mention guys like Cam Bynum making excellent plays, Josh Metellus still making excellent plays. I thought Ivan Pace played a good game as well.
Yeah.
And this is without Jordan Hicks. This is without a Caleb Evans. They played 18 different defenders in this game. Brian Flores is getting a lot of people involved, and I think you're seeing that development too kind of pay off.
I agree. I mean, I've said this before. That's been consistently the better side of the ball this season, even when everybody was healthy on offense, even when they had Cousins, even when they had Jefferson early in the year. The defense has just been better, and that's without as many resources being put into it.
Yeah, it's incredible too. And I think the key is, as we said, the development of the younger guys, where we came into the season wondering who is going to step up. I mean, nobody expected Josh Metellus to do what he's doing. Nobody expected Ivan Pace to go from undrafted to, I saw he made a list of like ESPN's top players under 24. I'm like, what? Wow. Yep. That's insane. And it's coming from respected guys too, like former NFL players, Matt Bowen, who's doing that analysis for them. So that means a lot. I mean, and this kid's doing a lot. And it's those types of players. It was a Caleb Evans through 10 starts who was playing pretty well for them too. And when he comes back after the bye, that will help a lot. So I think you got to credit, obviously, the coaching staff, but they've got some young players who are taking some big steps.
Well, we'll see where those steps lead them. We'll see who's under center in 2 weeks. We'll take a little break here because there's a bye week, and Andrew will talk again in a couple weeks.
Sounds good, Mike. Thanks.
Let's do some poetry today on Daily Delivery. My good friend Keith Rashad, I am told, sir, that you have 4 Vikings-related haikus. I guess one for every field goal the Bears kicked to beat the Vikings on Monday night.
It's all about symbolism when it comes to poetry.
Yep. Each haiku is a field goal. Let's get right into it. Why don't you give me haiku number 1, please?
Look to the heavens. That's where that pass was going. He was lost in space.
Which pass? Which pass? There's a lot of them that were up in the heavens.
Well, that's why all you got to do is look to the heavens, because they're all shooting around out there.
Yeah, the Pasternaut did not have his greatest game, did he?
No, he did not. My deep and abiding love for Josh Dobbs has waned significantly.
It seems like it was maybe more of a fling than a long-term relationship with Josh Dobbs.
They're starting to feel that way. Starting to feel the shine has worn off, as it were. She's not as pretty in the daylight as she was last night.
Yeah, it wasn't a great sign that Kevin O'Connell wouldn't commit to him being the starter after the bye based on that performance.
Well, so that raises a question, and it's sort of troubling, right? Which is, how much is O'Connell to blame for this?
I think some.
Because 4 interceptions is just bad. It's just bad. 2 of them were deflections, though, right?
Right.
And maybe not the world's greatest passes, but still things should have happened. But there were other things that happened in that game, right? The thing with O'Connell is when you measure up, when you tally it all up, right? You put it in the good column, the bad column. There's still more in the good column than there is in the bad column.
Definitely.
Okay. But the way that his offense stalls out during the course of games regularly.
Even with Cousins.
Exactly. It happened last year.
Yes.
It would be a great start to the game.
Yep.
Nothing for 2.5 quarters, and then a furious fourth quarter rally or come back to win.
Right.
And so to what extent is he putting this guy who seems to be better when he doesn't think about things or doesn't have a chance to really process?
Even though he's a very smart quarterback, he seems to be better when you kind of give him a limited menu and say, okay, go use your talent, go tell me what you're good at, instead of trying to give him everything you've got.
Well, he's a very smart human being.
Yes.
Whether or not he's a smart quarterback is kind of the point. There's two different
things. You're right. Okay, give me the second haiku, because I'm sure we're going to get into a lot of these things along the way.
Yes. Go for it on fourth. Cousins could have made that throw short of the marker.
I did not understand. 4th and 7 from midfield in the third quarter when in a 3-3 game when everyone's having a hard time scoring points. Like, I did not get that. Like, he's been hearing it from people like, you're not aggressive enough. I feel like it was like, oh, I'll show you. I'll go for it from 4th and 7 with an offense that's done absolutely nothing, with a quarterback I don't seem to trust, and just hand the Bears 3 points.
Yeah. So as we were just talking about, how much blame is put on O'Connell's shoulders, who really has rallied the group, as it were, and kept them in it when it's a very tough season. There have been a lot of challenges. And again, we'll get to where he ranks on coaches on this team later. Yeah. Another haiku. But that did not seem like the right place and time to do that.
And that's the thing. He as a motivator, as a manager of the overall situation, and as an offensive mind, he's above average. As a game manager, whether it's play calls or game feel, he's mediocre at best.
Well, but how good is he in terms of putting a game plan together too, right? Because again, it seems like they have stretches where they're really good, often sometimes early in the game, and then they have success, or have had success late in the game when you have to kind of throw everything against the wall. But when it comes to sort of mixing and matching and figuring out where your strengths lie and how to play against the other team's strengths and the other team's weaknesses, they don't seem to be doing a very good job of that.
I agree. I've been unimpressed with that part of Kevin O'Connell, which you would imagine would be his strength as an offensive guy. Haiku 3, please.
It's not a good sign when the most dynamic plays are all penalties.
They did benefit from some fortune, especially in that first half when nothing was going right. They got some things to go their way with the penalties, and then there was a pass interference that got him down. There was the Bears did everything they could, and the refs helped them too along the way. Did everything they could to keep them in the game, and they had the chance. They're up 10-9 with the ball in Bears territory with 3 minutes left. They still, you could say they deserve to lose that game, but at that point they should have won that game, and they didn't.
No, and I don't know. This is probably not accurate, but it feels like they gained more yards on Bears penalties than they did from their own offense.
That is not accurate. They gained 270 yards or something. They eventually gained some yards.
Well, but if you take out that one touchdown drive, right?
Then it was more like 200. Yeah, but they were not good, and anything that got going felt like it bogged down with a turnover or something weird happened, or they turned it over on downs or something like that. Anytime they had something going. But you're right. The Bears are not good. That's the frustrating thing. The Bears are so bad. They didn't let Justin Fields, aside from a couple times, they didn't let him throw the ball more than 3 feet. It was Justin, throw it to that guy standing very close to you, like a long handoff. Throw it to that guy. Don't do anything too complicated.
So here's my question for you then.
Okay.
Which quarterback looked more scared and discombobulated during the course of that game?
I mean, it was definitely Dobbs, but Fields did his best. Yeah, well, Fields did his best to give it away. Those 2 fourth quarter fumbles, that basically got the Vikings back in the game. The Bears are driving for a score. They're up 9-3. It's like third down. Like the announcer said it right. It was like the only thing you can't do there is turn the ball over, and he fumbles. And then they're driving again, and he fumbles again. Like Metellus made good plays on both those things, but I thought Fields did more good things than Dobbs did and looked more comfortable than Dobbs did in that game. But neither one of them looked particularly comfortable. Well,
he may have turned the ball over less, but
yeah.
It was so embarrassing to watch. You're exactly right. Nothing more than long handoffs. He threw what seemed like one good pass downfield in that final drive to get him into field goal range. And otherwise it was, I'm getting this ball to whoever I can as soon as I can, because I do not want to touch this thing anymore.
No.
I am done holding on to this ball, giving me all of this responsibility as quarterback, and having me hold this ball all this time is not good, not what you want. So I'm just going to fling it to the closest guy I can and forget about it.
That also, though, is what the Flores defense will give you, is the kind of quick hits. You want to get away from the pressure, away from having to think too much about, are they dropping? Are they blitzing? Like, the best way to beat that is those quick throws. But yeah, it doesn't really work if you're, bogging down, turning it over, having to kick field goals all the time. But, they've held, they've basically held teams down until the very end in these last two games.
Well, let's get to number 4.
Let's do that then.
Good most of the game. Not good enough in the end. Was Zimmer coaching?
It was very Zimmer-esque endings, wasn't it? Not like 2015 Zimmer when you could count on the defense to make those plays, but like 2021, 2021 Zimmer defenses where he wanted them to be the heroes so bad, but they had they didn't have the personnel anymore, and it was just chaos at the end when they tried to have the defense make those plays.
Brian Flores is the best coach on the staff, and it's going to be sad and wrong, and it's going to feel a little bit, it's not an exact parallel, but it's going to feel a little bit like when Mike Tomlin left when Brad Childress was still the head coach.
Right. I think O'Connell's got more upside than Childress did. Although Childress, by the time Childress got them very close to a Super Bowl. We will say that. He got them very close to a Super Bowl.
If Brad Childress's team had, just like last night, had only given up 4 turnovers instead of 5, they would have made to the Super Bowl and they would have won that year.
Yes.
If it was only 4, they would have won.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and I'm not, like I said, the parallel is not perfect.
I get it. I get it though. Yeah.
But Brian Flores is the best coach, and it's going to be sad when he inevitably leaves.
I don't want to think about this team without Brian Flores, because they would be 4-8 right now without Brian Flores. If they had a defensive court, if they still had
that optimistic, are you?
I mean, think about if O'Connell's like, you know what, Ed Donatel had a rough first year, but I'm going to stick with him for a second year. Like, imagine if Ed Donatel was the defensive coordinator this year. They'd be in the tank right now.
You see, it's that hostile speculation like that. That is why everybody's so angry at the media nowadays. And you're just throwing out your cruel takes about Ed Donatel still being around for another year.
I have lingered a little bit long on the Ed Donatel harshness, but I mean, it's also just a way of saying that I've been really impressed with Flores. They put a lot on him this year, and I thought, man, they're asking him to do a lot with not that much, and he has done more than I could have imagined.
I miss him already.
Obviously, the film review and poetry today leaned heavily on the quarterback question. That brings me to the cooler. We got a full-blown quarterback controversy, both the Vikings and the Gophers. We don't know who their quarterback is going to be the next time they play a game, and that is an interesting place to be given where we went into the season with both these teams. Kirk Cousins, the bona fide starter coming in, Athan Kaliakmanis, the bona fide starter. Now the Vikings could turn potentially to their 4th starting quarterback this year. Think about it. Kirk Cousins started the year, played most of the games. He got hurt. Nick Mullins was already on IR, so Jaron Hall started that game against Atlanta. Joshua Dobbs has started the last 3. They could certainly turn to Mullins after the bye. I don't think that's what I would do. I think that's boring. I think it's a boring decision. I think it maybe is the decision that helps you get to 9-8 or something like that and make the playoffs, but you're going nowhere in the postseason if you don't have a dynamic quarterback. Josh Dobbs is your most dynamic quarterback. Can Kevin O'Connell live with his mistakes, though? 8 turnovers in 4 games. That is not winning football. I get it. That's not a winning formula, but he also has 8 touchdowns in those 4 games, 5 passing, 3 rushing. Can he live with that roller coaster? That is the question I want to know. Sounds like he has a hard time with it based on some of the things he was saying Monday, saying you've got to limit those mistakes, and I get that. You want to play the quarterback that gives you the best chance to win. Complementary football, Justin Jefferson coming back, who can get him the ball. If you're reading between the lines, maybe he's thinking of a switch to Nick Mullins, but they're going to take some time to evaluate all this. I'd stay with Dobbs. I really would. Maybe at least for part of one more game. If it's a disaster like it was for some of that game against Chicago, I get it. But give him a better game plan. Give him one more chance. See if you can keep kind of getting that lightning in a bottle, because you have no chance in the playoffs if you don't have some kind of dynamic quarterback. I know the defense is playing well, but a good offense will find a way to score against that defense. A good playoff team will pick them apart at some point. I just don't like the matchup unless you have a dynamic quarterback. We'll see, though. It is a question for another time. It's a question we used to have to solve a lot in the 80s and 90s. Who's the Vikings quarterback? A little bit in the 2000s when it was, Tavares Jackson, Gus Frerotte, Kelly Holcomb before, Favre got here. We did some of that a little bit later too, but since Kirk Cousins got here, it has been, one guy only really until this year. So this is a different feeling, and I'll be curious to see what Kevin O'Connell ultimately decides to do. That'll do it for me today. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get out of here right now. Jeff Day will join me on Thursday's podcast to talk Gopher volleyball. I think Chip Scoggins will be on with me Friday to talk about some of these same things we just talked about now, but maybe more in depth with the Gophers, with the Vikings decisions, with some of what's going on with the Wild and Wolves, and other things beyond that. Until then, have a great rest of your Wednesday. Back at it again tomorrow.